A realtor is facing a capital murder charge for a 2012 murder in Arlington.
Velasquez is in jail right now. This arrest comes 14 years after 33-year-old Irasema Chavez was found stabbed roughly 100 times in her home.
Quiet, ordinary day at this apartment complex in Arlington. But more than 14 years ago, January 2012, inside this second-story unit, a gruesome crime scene. 32-year-old Irasema Chavez stabbed 100 times. Her case went cold. Back in 2012, Arlington police released this surveillance video from outside Chavez's apartment, hoping for leads. A person in baggy clothes and a hoodie walks up the stairs and knocks. There is some communication at the front door, then the person goes inside the unit. Blood not belonging to Chavez at the scene later revealed detectives were looking for a woman.
The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
At 8:51 in the morning, a little girl walked up a staircase to spend the day with her aunt. She knocked. No answer. She pushed the door open. What she found inside would take 14 years, an FBI genealogy team, and a piece of discarded trash sitting in a curbside garbage can to finally explain. Because the woman lying dead in that kitchen hadn't been killed by a stranger who broke in through a window. There was no forced entry, no broken lock, no pried open frame, no sign of a struggle at the door at all. Whoever did this, she let them in, and she was stabbed almost 100 times. This is the story of Irasema Chavez and the friend who came back. Before we get into the how, it's worth sitting with the where, because it matters. This isn't a story that unfolds in some isolated rural stretch of Texas, miles from another human being. Arlington sits almost exactly between Dallas and Fort Worth, home to an NFL stadium, an MLB stadium, a major theme park. 500,000 people live there. It is, by every measure, an unremarkable American city, the kind with strip malls and highway overpasses and apartment complexes packed close together, where neighbors hear each other's televisions through the walls, but rarely learn each other's names. That's the world Irasema Chavez was living in. Not isolated, not remote, surrounded, in fact, by exactly the kind of density that should make a violent crime like this almost impossible to get away with. And yet, for 14 years, someone did. That's part of what makes cases like this one so unsettling to sit with. We tend to imagine unsolved murders happening in the shadows, far from anyone who could help. But this happened in daylight-adjacent suburbia, in a building with other tenants coming and going, near a busy street, close enough to a family member that a niece could be dropped off there like it was any other Friday. The violence wasn't hidden by distance, it was hidden by silence, by the fact that whoever did this simply walked back down those same stairs afterward, and nobody who saw them thought anything was wrong. Arlington, Texas, January 20th, 2012. A second-floor apartment in the 2700 block of South Collins Street, an ordinary stretch of highway-adjacent apartment complexes, the kind of place you drive past 1,000 times without ever really noticing it. Irasema Chavez was 32 years old. She lived alone. And on this particular Friday morning, she was expecting family. Her niece was being dropped off to spend the day with her, the way kids do during school breaks, the way it probably happened dozens of times before without incident. The niece climbed the stairs, knocked. Nothing. She went inside. At approximately 8:51 a.m., Arlington police were called to the apartment. What they found was a scene almost too violent to comprehend. Irasema was in the kitchen. She had been stabbed more than 100 times. Let that number sit for a second. Not 2 or 3 wounds in a struggle gone wrong. Not the 5 or 6 you might see in a robbery that turned deadly in a panic. 100. That is not the number of someone trying to stop a person. That is the number of someone who could not stop themselves. And here is the detail that would haunt this case for the next 14 years. There was no forced entry. No broken door. No pried window. Irasema Chavez had opened that door herself. Which means, statistically, psychologically, in every way detectives think about a case like this, the odds were overwhelming that she knew exactly who she let inside that morning, or the night before. Think about how you actually behave with a stranger at your door. You crack it. You keep the chain on. You ask who's there before you even touch the lock. Now think about how you behave with someone you've known for years. You just open it. You don't think twice. You're already turning around to grab something from the kitchen before they've even stepped inside. Detectives look at doors the way the rest of us look at faces. A door tells you almost everything about the relationship between a victim and whoever came through it. And this door was telling them, from day one, that Irasema Chavez had not been ambushed by a stranger. She had welcomed someone in. Here's what should bother you about this case. It's not that police had no evidence. It's that they had plenty of evidence. And for 14 years, none of it was enough. Let's go through what they actually found. Clue 1. The television. Irasema's TV was missing from the apartment. Gone. Which on the surface reads like a simple robbery. Someone breaks in, kills her, grabs something valuable, and leaves. Except, remember, nothing was broken to get in. Someone walked out of that apartment carrying a stolen television in broad daylight or under cover of night, and no one who saw them thought to question it. Clue 2. The blood. On the TV stand in her bedroom, crime scene investigators found a single droplet of blood, fresh, and it wasn't Irasema's. It was sent to a crime lab for DNA analysis. The profile came back, belonging to a Hispanic female. But when that profile was run through CODIS, the FBI's National Criminal DNA Database, there was no match. Whoever this blood belonged to had never been arrested for a crime serious enough to have their DNA already on file. It was a dead end. On paper, at least. Clue 3. The video. Investigators pulled surveillance footage from the night before Irasema's body was discovered. It showed a figure in baggy clothing, a hoodie pulled up over their head, climbing those same stairs toward her apartment. Police released the footage to the public, hoping someone, somewhere, would recognize the walk, the build, the clothes. Nobody came forward. The shadowy figure in that video stayed exactly that, a shadow. Clue 4. A face that didn't exist yet. In 2016, 4 years after the murder, Arlington police tried something new. They partnered with a company called Parabon Nanolabs, which specializes in something called DNA phenotyping, using genetic material to predict what a person physically looks like, not a sketch pulled from a shaky witness memory, a face built directly from the code inside that single blood droplet. The result was a composite image, long brown hair, Latino ancestry, an estimated age. It went out to the public through news coverage and appeals for tips, and still, nothing. 4 separate leads, a stolen TV, a blood sample, video of the suspect's own body walking up a staircase, a predicted face built from DNA itself. And for 12 more years, none of it led anywhere at all. Picture how frustrating that actually is from the inside of a police department. It's not that detectives lacked ambition or lacked leads on paper, it's that every single lead ran into the same wall. The TV was gone, but no pawnshop record ever surfaced. The blood was there, but the person it belonged to had simply never been fingerprinted or arrested for anything in their entire life. The video was clear enough to broadcast on the local news, but a hoodie and a walk aren't a face, and nobody picked up the phone. Even the composite image, generated from raw genetic code, was still, in the end, just a probability. A guess, dressed up as a face. Every tool law enforcement had in 2012 got them to the edge of an answer and then stopped short of it. Not because anyone was careless, because the actual answer required a piece of technology that hadn't been built yet. This is the part of true crime stories that rarely gets much attention. The years where nothing happens. Detectives rotated in and out of the department. Some retired without ever closing the file. The case sat, technically open, technically cold, which in police terms doesn't mean forgotten. It means waiting. Waiting for a piece of technology that simply didn't exist yet, because in 2012, the tool that would eventually crack this case wasn't available to law enforcement anywhere. Investigative genetic genealogy, the method that uses public genealogy databases to build family trees out of crime scene DNA, didn't become a mainstream police tool until 2018, when it was famously used to identify the Golden State Killer after decades on the run. Irasema Chavez's file sat on a shelf in Arlington, while an entire new forensic science was being invented around cases just like hers, cases that had run out of every conventional lead there was to chase. November 2024, 12 years after Irasema's death. The Arlington Police Department's homicide unit sat down with the FBI's Dallas field office to ask one question. Could this case finally be solved using genetic genealogy? The FBI's Investigative Genetic Genealogy team, known internally as IGG, agreed to take it on. Here's how this actually works, because it sounds like science fiction, but it's really closer to genealogy homework taken to an extreme. Investigators start with an unknown DNA sample, in this case, that 14-year-old blood droplet pulled from a bedroom TV stand. They build a genetic profile from it, then upload that profile into public genealogy databases, the same kind of databases ordinary people use to find long-lost cousins, or build out a family tree for fun on a weekend. The DNA doesn't come back with a name attached to it. It comes back with relatives. Third cousins, second cousins once removed, people who share a chunk of DNA with whoever left that blood behind, people who almost certainly have no idea they are connected to a murder investigation at all. From there, it becomes old-fashioned detective work, layered on top of new science. Genealogists build out family trees branch by branch, cross-referencing birth records, marriage records, obituaries, narrowing a pool of potentially thousands of relatives down to the handful of people who fit the age, sex, and geography of the suspect. It is slow, it is unglamorous, it takes patience most true crime doesn't have room for. Consider the scale of what these genealogists are actually doing. They aren't looking at a photograph and asking, "Does this look like our guy?" They're looking at spreadsheets of shared genetic markers, measuring how many centimorgans of DNA one anonymous profile shares with another, and using that number to estimate the exact relationship between two people who have never met and never will. A shared segment that size usually means a second cousin. A segment that size usually means a great aunt. It's statistics wearing the clothes of a detective story. And then, once the math narrows the pool down to a handful of family trees, someone still has to do the unglamorous part. Pulling obituaries, cross-referencing old yearbooks, checking who was living in Tarrant County in January of 2012 and who wasn't, checking who was the right age, the right sex, and close enough geographically to have plausibly been inside that apartment. It is part science, part library research, and part old-fashioned shoe leather, all working together on a single blood droplet that had been sitting in an evidence locker since before some of the genealogists doing the work had even graduated high school. And in April of 2026, 5 months after the FBI agreed to take the case, it worked. The IGG team notified Arlington detectives that they had identified a potential suspect. Her name was Mayra Velasquez. Here is the part of this story that separates it from a random act of violence. The part that made even the lead detective choke up in front of television cameras. Mayra Velasquez wasn't a stranger. She wasn't an ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend, or a neighbor Irasema barely knew, or a name pulled out of some distant, unfamiliar branch of a family tree. According to Arlington Police Chief Al Jones, Velasquez and Chavez were, in his words, close friends. They lived just a few miles apart. And Velasquez had been inside that apartment before, not as a suspect creeping up unfamiliar stairs in the dark for the first time, but as someone Irasema had let in, over and over again, long before the night everything changed forever. Suddenly, the detail that had puzzled investigators for 14 years wasn't a mystery anymore. No forced entry, because there didn't need to be one. Irasema opened the door the exact way you open a door for someone you already trust completely. The surveillance video, the baggy hoodie, the figure climbing the stairs the night before the body was found, may not have been a stranger casing the building at all. It may have simply been a friend, walking up to see her one more time. And that reframing changes the entire emotional shape of this case. A stranger breaking in is terrifying in one specific way: the randomness of it. The idea that violence can simply arrive at your door for no reason at all. But a friend who commits an act like this is terrifying in a completely different way. It says that you can know someone for years, share meals with them, let them into your home over and over, without a second thought, and still never actually know what they're capable of. Irasema wasn't unlucky in the way we usually mean that word in these stories. She wasn't targeted at random by someone scouting an unfamiliar building. If police are right, she was killed by someone who already had a key to her trust, if not to her apartment. A motive still hasn't been made public. Police say they don't yet fully understand why, only who, and increasingly, how sure they are. Identifying a genetic match through a family tree is not the same thing as proving it in a courtroom. Investigators needed Velasquez's actual DNA, not a relative's, not an estimate built from probability. Hers, specifically. So in May of 2026, detectives did something deceptively simple. They waited for her to throw something away. Discarded items left out in public trash are, legally, fair game, requiring no warrant at all. Detectives recovered a piece of trash Velasquez had thrown out. Reports describe it as a plastic fork, and sent it directly to a crime lab for testing. The DNA on that fork was compared against the 14-year-old blood droplet lifted from Irasema's bedroom TV stand. It was a match. On July 16th and 17th, 2026, Mayra Velasquez, a 42-year-old real estate agent, was arrested and charged with capital murder in the death of Irasema Chavez. Detective Tracy Dixon, who had personally carried this case for years, later told reporters that Velasquez had also been formally interviewed by investigators, and that statements she made during that interview became, in Dixon's own words, critical evidence. She wouldn't elaborate further, citing the ongoing case moving toward trial. That detail matters more than it might seem on the surface. An interview isn't an interrogation in the dramatic, movie sense. Often, it's a conversation that feels almost casual to the person sitting across the table, a detective, asking open-ended questions, letting silences sit, watching for the moments where someone's story doesn't quite line up with the physical evidence already in hand. By the time investigators sat down with Velasquez, they weren't fishing for a name. They already had one, confirmed by DNA. What they needed was everything else: the timeline, the relationship, the version of events that could either hold up in front of a jury or collapse the moment it met the evidence. Whatever was said in that room, prosecutors clearly believe it strengthens a case already built on genetic proof. Chavez's cell phone, recovered years earlier during the original investigation, is also expected to play a role in the prosecution. Police say they're saving those specific details for the courtroom. It's worth pausing here on just how unglamorous the final piece of this 14-year investigation actually was. After DNA phenotyping, after a predicted composite face, after an entire federal genetic genealogy program spent months building out a family tree branch by branch, the piece of evidence that turned a name into an arrest was a piece of plastic cutlery someone threw in the trash after a meal. There's something almost darkly poetic about that. All of that science, all of that infrastructure, all of those federal resources, and in the end, it came down to something as mundane as garbage day. At the news conference announcing the arrest, Police Chief Al Jones didn't talk like a man simply closing out a file. He talked like someone who had been carrying this case personally for a very long time. "I am extremely proud of the work that our officers and our crime scene investigators did on this case," he said. "They showed tenacity and dedication, and they never gave up." But it was Detective Dixon, the one who had worked this case through all the years it had no answers at all, who couldn't finish her sentence without stopping. Reporters asked her what it was like to finally tell Irasema's family that the case had been solved. She started to answer. Her voice broke. "Telling the family," she said. "That's why. 14 years is a long time to wait for a name. It's long enough for a little girl who found her aunt that morning to grow into an adult with a life of her own. Long enough for an entire branch of forensic science to be invented from scratch and become routine. Long enough, allegedly, for the person police say is responsible to build an entire career, post vacation photos online, and live just a few miles away from where it happened, for well over a decade. Think about what those 14 years actually looked like from the outside. Birthdays came and went without her. Holidays had an empty chair at the table that never quite got filled by anyone else. Somewhere in Arlington, a family kept living their lives in the same city where the person responsible for their loss was, allegedly, also living hers. Closing on houses, taking vacations, going about an ordinary week, while a case file sat waiting in a records room a few miles away. That's the quiet cruelty of a cold case that most documentaries don't linger on. It isn't just that a killer walks free. It's that everyone else has to keep living alongside that absence, in the same neighborhoods, on the same streets, without ever knowing it. Mayra Velasquez is currently being held at the Tarrant County Corrections Center, charged with capital murder. Her attorney has not yet been publicly identified, and a motive, the one piece even investigators admit they still don't have, remains unknown for now. What we do know is this: Irasema Chavez opened her door for someone she trusted, and it took 14 years, a stranger's blood, a family tree built from people who had no idea they were involved in any of it, and one discarded plastic fork to finally say her name back to her family, alongside the truth. If this is the first time you're hearing about investigative genetic genealogy, the same method that caught the Golden State Killer and dozens of other cold case suspects since, it is quietly becoming one of the most important tools in unsolved homicide investigations across the entire country. There are tens of thousands of cold cases still sitting in evidence lockers right now, waiting for exactly this kind of match to finally come through. Somewhere in a police department, Not so different from Arlington's, there is another blood droplet, another discarded sample, another file marked cold that isn't actually closed. It's just waiting for the technology, and the funding, and the patience to catch up to it. 14 years ago, nobody could have told Irasema Chavez's family that the answer to what happened to her already existed somewhere out there, hiding in the DNA of relatives who had never even met her. It just hadn't been found yet. For 14 years, the truth about what happened to Irasema Chavez existed in the DNA of people who had never heard her name, scattered across family trees they didn't even know they shared with each other. It took a federal program, a private lab, a team of genealogists, and one careless piece of trash to finally connect all of it back to a single door on South Collins Street. And now it has.